Hi, it's been a while since I built a computer, so when Be Quiet asked me if I wanted to test their new light-based 500 LX and the new Pure Loop 3 LX, I thought it was a good idea. It would have been easy to just redo my AM4 or AM5 test bench, just switching the processor and the cooler, but I thought what would be better is to do an Intel build. When I met them, they were talking about new product they had, and they have new Chromebook with i5 and i3 CPU, and they were also looking for people to do build with their Arrow Lake processor. So I asked them if I could get a 265K, and they accepted. Standard disclaimer, I'm not compensated for the review. I will keep the Be Quiet stuff as sample, and probably the Intel CPU. But I also asked them if I could borrow back the ARC B580 for the build because I wanted to test XeSS2, which was not out when I reviewed that card in February. So we'll go in and test that. The video will be in two parts. The first part will be the build, and the second part I want to look at what kind of performance I can get by that machine. So that should be fun. Let's talk a little about the component next. The case is the light-based 500 LX. The LX is for the lightning versus the regular one is more like no RGB and silent wing fan, while this one will have the light wing LX. You get 3 fans at an angle in the front, 1 fan in the back. It's also like the smallest brother of the LX 600 and 900, which were super interesting modular case because you could have them on one side or the other. But to get a more affordable and smaller case, Be Quiet like remove that feature. You cannot remove the feet anymore. Even if the case is a little smaller, you can still put a 360 millimeter AIO. It's what we're gonna do here. You still can put a 400 millimeter graphic card, so you still have space. Okay, for the processor, we have the Core Ultra i265K. It's a 20 thread and core CPU. You get 8 P-core and 12 E-core, so performance core and efficient core. The base power is 125 watt, but it can boost until 250. And when I was looking at my BIOS, there's even a 295 watt profile. So it will definitively consume more power than my 78X3D that is at 120 watts. So I'm curious what kind of like productivity performance you can get with that processor. And this one seems to more mainstream. Normally for processor, I like going around 350 to 450. Like, I think it's normally giving you the good performance to like price ratio, which normally would put you around the 600 or 700K like for Intel processor. For storage, right now I'm using my Gen 4 S70 Blade, but for the second part with performance, I got here a Gen 5 drive that is around 11 gig a second. Now, when I were talking to friends, we were like, yeah, after 4 or 5 gig a second, like I don't really notice performance increase and don't care anymore because like price of storage and RAM are increasing. I thought it would be interesting anyway to test the Gen 5 drive, but if you look at most recommendations, they say like they generate more heat and they are more expensive. So for most people, the recommendation is probably stay with a Gen 4 drive. But because I have 3 test bench and only 2 boot drive, I was always removing a drive from one machine to the other. So I think it was a good time to get a Gen 5 drive and test it. But for the build right now, we're using the Gen 4 drive. RAM, as you can see, it's empty. I basically scavenged the RAM on my AM5 build because RAM that I paid $140 maybe a year ago and a couple of weeks ago was still at that price is not $280 plus tax, which makes 0 sense. So it's a problem for future me, but for now we're just gonna use my DDR5 6000 CL30. It's an Expo RAM, But like I was able eventually with updating the BIOS to get it work at that frequency on Intel. For power, be quiet because I was doing a build. Send me their pure power 13M. It's a 1000 watt CPU. It has a cybernetic gold rating. I mean, I'm sure it's gonna be plenty of fine for what I'm doing. Now, because I'm using a CPU that's used more power, it's nice to have a 1000 watt, but at the same time, the B580 doesn't use that much power. So we'll be plenty under like the power budget for that build. But that's really not the case here. I'm gonna try to do a budget build, but I'm using quote because BuildJet with price of GPU and RAM that just went insane doesn't seem to exist anymore. So we'll set budget to mid-range build. Now for the graphic card, I asked Intel if I get the B580. Why? Well, I think it makes sense to do an Intel and quiet build. It makes sense to have the Intel graphic card. Also for Black Friday, you see them like at 320, which is $30-$40 under MSRP. And I still think in the 300 range, if you want something like new with 12 gig of VRAM, this is really a card I would consider. I actually consider like buying one for myself. For now, I think like for the price ratio, it's a really, really good card. It will be nice to test it with XeSS2, and the motherboard I choose come with a free Star Wars Outlook code, so maybe I'll try that too. Like I said, AIO, Pure Loop 3XL, LX, sorry, I always mix both. Pure Loop 3LX, which is for the lightning fan because you have the light wing. But of course, you also have a version with the silent wing that has no RGB. So if it's what you prefer, you can go for that. What's interesting is that you have like 12, you have those 10 like decal that you can put on top of your AIO. So I think it's an interesting way BeQuiet is doing it. If you don't buy AIO with a screen, at least they give you customization option for switching it. So I think it's a good way to make it a little different when you stay in the price point of AIO without like screen, which seems to be, you seem to have a lot of AIO with screen when you look at CES and Computex. So I'm kind of glad to have like a different AIO. It's a cheaper AIO than like the one that they have normally, so we'll see what they remove from it. Like you don't have the bottle to with extra liquid to refill it and different things like that. So, but it still used the Lightwing fan, so that's going to be interesting to test. And for the motherboard, I pay for that. As you can see here, what we have is the Z90 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi by MSI. I think in 20 years it's my first MSI product. Nothing against them, just seem to never have to buy one of the product. What was my reasoning? That was the cheapest Z890. Also, it came for a code for Star Wars Outlaws. So I thought it would be interesting to try the XeSS2 game. And also, I kind of find it funny that after a week after we done my networking at 2.5 gigahertz everywhere, I now have a motherboard that supports 5 gigahertz, so time to upgrade. No, I'm kidding. But there's two 10 gig port on the gateway, so I could definitively use one and try to use the 5 gigs, or maybe like put a 10 gig card later in the future. But at $249, it was the cheapest motherboard, and also it had price protection for Black Friday, so I went with that. Okay, let's start by the Lightbase 500. You can see it here next to my Darbase 701. They both consider like mid-size case, but you can see that the Lightbase 500 is way smaller. And you can see here like, by the side the difference between two cases. I always felt that the Darbase 701 was almost a full tower size. So you can see that it's a way smaller case here. You can see the inside of the case here. You have three Lightwing 120 fan at an angle, so they will be able to push air out of the case. The case uses a dual chamber design. You have another fan at the back of the case,
And you have two positions where you can put the power supply at the bottom or on top. Here you have a side view of the case. You can see that it's a mesh panel to favorize airflow. So it should be a louder case than a dark base 701, but we'll see how loud when we do some testing. You can see here a view of the front of the case. It's super easy to remove the side and top panel of that case. I really appreciate it, and you don't need any tools for it. Now, compared to the light base 600 and 900, you cannot put it on the side like that and remove the feet. And by doing that, you would choke part of the case because the mesh panel is under it and there's no feet. So that's a really bad idea. And it was just to demonstrate, but that's not really the way we would use the case anyway. Here we have a view under the case. Like I said, the feet are not removable anymore. And you have a mesh panel. You can add 3 fan if you want more airflow. And you have a dust filter under it. It's super easy to remove.
One thing I like about the Be Quiet case is a lot of parts are kind of like toolless. You just need to find the right way to remove it. And you know, everything kind of like, there's always a tiny latch somewhere and you can just take them away like that. Now in the 500, they angle the 3 reverted fan.
Okay, now for the processor, like I said, we have the 265K. It's an unlock processor, 20 core, 20 threads, 8 performance core, 12 efficiency core, uh, base power 125 watt, boost at 250 watts, but can go over that. It's been a long time since I built something with an Intel processor, so that's going to be fun to see how different the process is versus AM5. The motherboard I choose is the Z890 Gaming Plus Wi-Fi. Like I said, it was the cheapest Z890 motherboard. It come with 5 gigs networking. It come with a code for Star Wars Outlaws. It's a DDR5 only motherboard. It's also come with Wi-Fi 7. So I can test that with my new access point that is also Wi-Fi 7. So this is for those 3 reasons that I ended up choosing that motherboard. And also it was the cheapest. You can see some of the accessory here, 2 SATA cables. You have 1 key to unlock the NVMe, all the screws, some MSI Dragon stickers. You have the Wi-Fi 7 antenna there. Right now I'll use the 5 gigs, but eventually I'll test Wi-Fi 7 with that motherboard, but it's like 6 feet from the gateway, so not really worth it right now. You can see the motherboard here. There's a lot of logos and things like that, but I find interesting that they tell you which one is Gen 5 and Gen 4 for the NVMe straight on the heatsink. So this is useful. For the I/O, I would say it's functional. I would want more USB ports because you had keyboard, mouse, chargers, and it feel quite fast. But you have 2 USB-C at the back, so that's good. You have the antenna, and you have a HDMI and a display port because you need to remember also this processor have onboard graphics, which can be useful for quick syncs. So we'll test that later. Also like that they tell you which one is A2, B2 for the DIMM slot and which one you use as first. Like for the RAM, like I said, I just use my Flare X5 6000 megahertz CL30 DDR5 because I paid 140 for it last year and now it's like 280, which make no sense. So for now, I'm just gonna use memory I have on my AM5 build and deal with this problem later. Please send me memory if you actually like make them. I end up putting the RAM in the wrong slot, and when you boot, it said not optimal settings. Do you want to ignore or please change the RAM? So actually, I appreciate that it's idiot proof. And now we have the processor straight in the socket. I really appreciate they put a giant arrow on it compared to AMD. So it's quite evident which one is the corner here. No need to search. For the PSU, we have the Pure Power 13M for modular, which is a 1000 watt PSU, which is cybernetic gold. It should be plenty of power for this build, even if the processor can pump 300 watts at max. Like the fact that the B580 is not a GPU that asks for a lot of power, so we should have a nice headroom. You can see the main unit here, the user manual, the power cable is next to it, and you have all the cable under the manual. And here you can see all the cable accessory that come in the box. And except if you have advanced equipment, it's not really something a user can test. Like I don't feel like opening the power supply, and I don't have the equipment to test them anyways. But it seemed well built, and in general, like I didn't have any problem with all my Be Quiet PSU I've been using. You can see here the top of the PSU. And then we're gonna check next all the input that you have on it. It's a ATX 3.1 and PCI Express 5.1. So you can use like four 8-pin connector, or you can use the 12-pin, which is 2x6 PCI Express 5.1, a connector for the 600 watt. So it's up to date in the standard for this PSU. For the graphic card, I asked to get back the B580. I really liked the card when I tested the first time, and I thought it would be interesting to have an Intel card and CPU and test XeSS2 to see what kind of performance I would get with new games. I like the industrial and business-like design of the card. It's not flashy, and this way it doesn't take away from the rest of your build. You have two fun on that card. In my testing the first time, the card, even at full load, is super quiet and everything stay cool. So that's a thing that really impressed me the first time. And for building, we have the Pure Loop 3 LX. So it's the Lightwing base, so full RGB for the cooler, but they also, the non-LX version come with silent wing fan, and it's quieter. If you don't need RGB, that's like a good option. Like I mentioned, I really like that you have like 10 different foil that you can put on top and then clip a protective cover on it. I really think it's a way to customize your AIO without a screen, and it's cheaper that way. I don't know, but I wish there would be like some kind of like file so you can print your own design also. So, but it's an interesting perks to that new Pure Loop AIO. As you can see, there's a lot in the box here. It's the fan are not mounted, and it's really like some of their Lightwing fans. So it kind of makes sense that like they just grab the fan in the factory and put them in the box. Cheaper to reuse the fan. They just change the sticker on it. As you can see, you have the three fan, you have the radiator with the pump, the manual, and the mounting kits. And here I got all the hardware out to mount the fan and to mount the AIO on the CPU. They also made an 8-minute video to tell you like how to mount it if you want, instead of reading the instruction booklet. The video is super well done, but I had to refer to it a couple of times for things that was not clear. But it's been a long time since I built the AIO. You just need to place the fan on it, and you have 4 screw by fans. So I mean, the assembly for that part is quite easy. You just need to make it in the right direction and look at the picture like they mounted it, and they made this connector to daisy chain them. But on my first try, I forgot to plug that connector to the motherboard after. So when I started, you had the pump was working, but like the fan were not working on the AIO, so I had to, after doing a quick OCCT, everything was still fine but high. So then I reroute the cable, plug it to the motherboard, and everything was fine. And quickly edited it, and this is the end of the mounting for the fan. Here you can see the 10 decal. Of course, I would have to choose the Space Invader one uh, to give it a cool gamer look. And I hope that in the future you can print more of them or that you have custom option. It's a great cheap way to have a AIO without the screen but still have some customization. So I think Be Quiet has a good idea here. Now you can see the inside of the case. I'm getting ready to at least place the motherboard and start mounting the component. But before mounting the motherboard in the case, always make sure to plug in advance the power cable for the CPU because those are always in a corner and super tough to reach. So that's a pro tip here. You can also see here that I mounted the bracket for the AIO wrong. They're supposed to be on top and bottom and not on the side. So I had to remove those and re-put them right. And then I put my S70 Blade Gen 1, Gen 4 drive for storage, but for the performance, I will redo the build this week to have like Gen 5 drive that's go to 11 gig a second. I don't really expect crazy performance difference for gaming, but I still think that will be interesting. I also pre-plug everything I think I will need for the PSU. Add the SATA cable because the hubs for all the fan will use that. I use the bottom position for the PSU, and because the panel is mesh and there's hole in it, even if it's a metal panel, there will be plenty of breathing room for the power supply because it's perforated, as you can see here. So there's plenty of breathing room for the side of this panel, but we'll see how much noise it will create versus my Dark Base 701 that has like a full soundproof panel and no perforation in it. Now we have the motherboard mounted in the case with the magic of editing. I will cable manage later, and you can set the bottom there's place to put 3 more fan if you want to push air out, but more interestingly, if you want to bring fresh air to the case, there's plenty of space with the feet, and you have like a dust filter at the bottom. I'm also pretty sure this is the worst application of thermal paste I ever did. Um, there was only enough for like one application, though I do have extra thermal paste. So after doing such a mess, I was like, oh no, now we need to try it this way. As you can see the end result there. And I was like, oh no, now we need to try it this way instead of like redone it like I would normally do. If the performance are not good, though, I will use another tube I have and redo the application. Next step was to mount the AIO radiator to the top of the case with the screw, the 12 screw that they give you for that. I put a little less because I know I will probably remove it to test something else, but that part of the application was super easy to do. And now we have everything mounted and ready to go with zero cable management. But let's just see if everything boot. And normally I won't put the GPU because there's onboard graphic. So I just want to make sure everything is fine before putting the GPU in. So I was able to reach the BIOS. It was only the version A20 of the BIOS, and they're at A70 now. I think the BIOS was like almost a year and a half old. So I updated the BIOS, which was a good thing because at the beginning I was not able to reach the 6000 megahertz of the RAM in Expo. It's got stuck to 4800, which is the default settings, and I had a lot of issue with that. So I was able, after updating the BIOS, to finally reach the full CL30 6000 megahertz for the DDR5 RAM. Next step was to install Windows 11 Pro. I normally use Bazite now, but because it came with Star Wars Outlaw that use Ubisoft Connect, I tried for a couple hours using Lutrix Wine to get it work. But at the end, it was not worth the headache, so I just did a quick Windows 11 install. We'll test that and then I'll go back to Bazite. As you can see here, we have our build done. Everything is working fine. I add the GPU for the Intel Arc, and we should test it soon. We can see here the full build light up. Like I said, part 2 will be like what kind of performance we can get with the Intel Arc and the B580 graphic cards, and also what I like and dislike about every part that I test today. So stay tuned for that.